Welcome to this edition of State Affairs. It is coming to you from State Affairs Studio here in Ibadan. So welcome to this side of time. It's a continuation of where we stopped on Monday. The subject is Aburi Accord, before the guns began to boom. So this is part 2 of the analysis. I am Edmondo Bilo. Welcome to this class of politics and power. In the last edition of the program, what we did was to walk down history lane to understand events before Aburi Accord. There were complex issues that led to the feuding parties going to Ghana to have a meeting to settle their quarrel. And some of the issues we looked at on Monday were the different conferences, constitutional conferences, that were held to shape Nigeria's federalism. I remember talking about the Lancaster House London Constitutional Conference of 1957. I also talked about the conference of 1958. I drew your attention to the Willis Commission of Inquiry. I also read from the book, This House of Oduduwa Must Not Fall. The reason we read from the book was the insistence of the North to say that certain conditions must be met or they will not be part of Nigeria at independence. And Paolaniwo Ajayi looked at some of those issues in his book, This House of Oduduwa Must Not Fall. We also talked about the Awolowo-Akintola feud that led to Operation Wet Year in western Nigeria. That quarrel between the two gladiators in Yoruba politics at the time also meant that Awolowo was sent to prison. He was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment for treasonable felony. He was accused by the federal government of plot to remove the government of the day. I played Femi Kende in that edition of the program. We also went as far as examining some positions of scholars of politics on what Nigeria was at the time. You listened to Odia Ofimu and you listened to Professor Egusa Osagai. On this edition, we will pay attention to the decisions arrived at in Aburi. Again, we will still try to lay foundations on various subjects that led to the Aburi Accord. I called this one the trouble with Nigeria. Then I asked a question here. Did the North plan to break away from Nigeria after the counter-coup of 1966? I will answer the question. Who made the first and boldest attempt to break away from Nigeria? Who acted to break away? Was it Ojukwu? No. It was Isaac Adakaboro from the Niger Delta, an Ijaw man. He was the first Nigerian to come up with a well-orchestrated plan to break away from Nigeria. And he launched an armed insurrection. We'll talk about that on this edition of the program. We'll also talk about events between Ojukwu and Gowon that made both of them to go to Aburi. So welcome again to this edition of State Affairs, where we are looking at Aburi Accord before the guns began to boom. On this edition, you have the opportunity to call in, to engage me. I want to also get your opinion. So there is a number to call. You can take the number now, so that when it's time to call, you will join the discourse. The number is 080 999 18449. I think the number is on the screen. So you can call when the lines are open to join the discourse. And we'll also appeal to you as you listen. You can retweet, you can share, so that we can bring more persons into the loop in the discourse of the past, in preparation for the future. The Aburi Accord is a significant historical agreement that emerged from a meeting held in Aburi, Ghana in January 1967. The meeting happened during the stages leading to the Nigerian-Biafran War. It was a meeting attended by high-ranking officials from both Nigerian government and the Biafran side, led by Odumegwu Ojukwu, who at the time was the governor of the Eastern region. It was after Aburi that Ojukwu declared the state of Biafra. Yakubu Gowon led the delegation of the Nigerian side. At the heart of the Aburi Accord was the attempt to find a peaceful resolution to the escalating conflict between the Nigerian federal government, led by General Yakubu Gowon, and the Eastern region, led by Colonel Odumegwu Ojukwu. So the accord aimed to address key issues, including the allocation of resources, control over regional affairs, and the status of the Eastern region within Nigeria. During the meeting, a series of agreements were reached, with both sides consenting to a framework for a federal system that would grant more autonomy to the regions, including the Eastern region. The accord also outlined plans for a ceasefire and the withdrawal of federal troops from the Eastern region. However, despite the initial optimism surrounding the Aburi Accord, subsequent disagreement and mistrust between the two parties led to the collapse of the accord. The failure to fully implement the agreement laid out in Aburi ultimately led to a full-blown civil war, which resulted in significant loss of life and widespread suffering. Chief Lekon Alabi is a journalist. He has been around. He loves history. He tells historical stories. In 2021, I asked him, why did the Nigerian side renege on Aburi? He speaks here. On Aburi we stand, Ojukwu insists, Chief Lekon Alabi.
Thank you very much. At the beginning of this program, you said this is Aburi 2021. That is, those who are not born when Aburi report came out in January 1967 and thereafter, now they can compare and contrast. I was not there when the then Mr. Kenzua advised the then military head of state against implementing the Aburi report, but I can imagine the present generation, if they compare the Aburi report of 1967 and Aburi 2021 as being implemented on this channel, that they would not have asked those who went to Accra in 1967 and you brought a report back, who would not have asked them, excuse me, were you out of the hall when this agreement was prepared? And we heard Ojukwu saying that it was read over by the then Ghanaian military head of state, General Ankara. So, if it was made, agreed, assented, and signed by chief secretaries of 3 chief secretaries, 2 representing Nigeria, 1 representing Biafra, already cast and molded. So how would anybody want to dissolve it? You were there, you met, the thing was typed, read over, signed, and given copies to you. So to me, it was when they got back to Lagos that the federal delegation led by the then head of state, Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, as publicly now known that it was the secretary of the cabinet, the immediate past Oba of Bini, may so rest in peace, who later went to the head of state to pinch him and say, sir, you have signed off Nigeria with this report. So probably the head of state will ask him, so what do you think we should do? Disregard. Disregard.
And he came out with that press conference
Disregard.
where he explained what Aburi meant to the Nigerian side.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Yes, that is Chief Lekon Alabi in 2021. You know, I've been taking on the Aburi discourse for some time, and hopefully, at some point, I will release a document. You know, my thoughts on Aburi and why we are where we are. Remember, Edmondo Bilo is a political scientist. I study politics. I look at it. I look at the theoretical aspect of politics. I monitor the practical aspect of politics. I collect books on politics. The essence is to prepare us for the future. The essence is to prepare a new leadership that understands the power of history. When you understand the power of history, you will know how effective one can be with that knowledge as a leader. History tells you what the future will be like. From Aburi, political scientists could see what the future of Nigeria was going to look like. Some of them predicted war, and war came. So we can predict the future to a good extent by understanding history. So in that interview, Chief Lekon Alabi was asking, why did the Nigerian side renege on the terms of the accord? See, the Aburi Accord remains a symbol of the challenges and complexities inherent in conflict resolution, highlighting the importance of genuine dialogue, compromise, and trust building in achieving lasting peace. According to Mark Siollun, in the book Oil Politics and Violence, The Aburi meeting of January 1967 evolved into perhaps the best documented constitutional debate of all time because it discussed fundamental concepts regarding the balance of power between the central and regional government in a federation. Why did Goan renege on the agreement he signed with Ojukwu in Aburi? After returning to Nigeria, General Goan, who was the head of state, called a press conference. Let's go back to the past.
The purpose of this press conference is to enlighten the public on the last Accra meeting of military leaders and to tell the nation where we go from here. Our main concern at the Aburi meeting was how to keep the country together and restore normal conditions. We reviewed the situation in the Nigerian army, and we all agreed that there should be one Nigerian army under a unified command as at present. We recognize that in the context of the events of 1966, the most practical way of achieving this aim is to organize the army into area commands. We did not go to Aburi to write a new constitution for Nigeria. The constitution of Nigeria will be written in Nigeria by Nigerians on the authority of the people of Nigeria. We, however, agreed to return to the status quo until January 17, 1966. And this is in keeping with my earlier public pronouncement that decrees or part of decrees which tended towards over-centralization should be repealed. We will continue to operate the existing federal constitution and the federal system of government until a new constitution is drawn up. In Aburi, we made an excellent start in the bid for permanent peace, but let us not deceive ourselves that it was possible to solve all Nigeria's problems in the two-day meeting of minds of Nigeria's military leaders. I did say immediately after that conference that Nigeria will definitely remain united. I would never have said so if we went there to fall apart. Nigeria will remain one indivisible country by the will of the people of this country.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
That was a strong statement from the head of state, Yakubu Gowon. That was a press conference in 1967 after he returned from Aburi. What has Ojukwu got to say about what happened in Aburi? Let's reflect on it.
State Affairs.
So, Ojukwu has his own reaction to what happened in Aburi. He explained how the discussion went, and he did not understand why the federal government of Nigeria had to renege. So we can listen to that now.
At Aburi, yes, we agreed on area commands for the armed forces. At Aburi, we agreed that the police force would be decentralized. We agreed on those. Yes. We agreed even to show that we didn't separate. At Aburi, we also agreed on a certain revenue formula. That's what happened at Aburi. Aburi again, because I always end up, it sounds odd today, but I always end up by saying I must have been naive, because I believed actually that would be the end. I'll confess to you, when I got back to Enugu, oh yes, I had a party, believing that probably the danger was over. That's what we thought. Until they then began to deny everything. It was the denial of Nigeria that made me publish the tapes of Aburi, because we had insisted that each one should have a set of tapes. Everybody talks about Confederation. Go and look at the transcript. There is no time that the word Confederation came from my lips.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Okay. I will take you into the details of the accord. But before we get to the details, it is good we lay a solid background so that we are not missing some point. Because Aburi did not just come from nowhere. There were many issues that led to Aburi. In the last edition of the program on Monday, I explained some. I will explain other issues. It will give us a broader understanding of what happened before Ojukwu and Goan found themselves in Aburi, Ghana. Remember, you can call in this time to join the discourse. The number is 080-309-18449. So you can call that number 080-309-18449 to join the discourse. How did we get to Aburi? Look at this. The Trouble with Nigeria. Have you seen that book, The Trouble with Nigeria, by Chinua Achebe? Oh, I'm not with a copy here. A good book. You'll find that book on udarabooks.com. So I took that title from Achebe's work. Look at this aspect of some of the issues. The problems of Nigeria's federalism was worsened by the incursion of the military into politics in January 1966, following the overthrow of the democratic government of Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa. Balewa, the premiers of Northern and Western region, top politicians and military officers were killed in the January coup, carried out by mostly Igbo officers and aborted by an Igbo officer in the persons of Aguyi Ironsi and Emeka Ojukwu. Get that point. The January coup was carried out by mostly Igbo officers, and it took senior Igbo officers to counter the coup. They aborted the coup. Nzogu and Co did not succeed. Ojukwu and the Ironsi aborted that coup, and Ironsi became the head of state. The conflict of the coup threw up the head of the army, General Aguyi Ironsi, an Igbo man, as Nigeria's first military head of state. Where did he go wrong? You know, after Ironsi took over, he fell out with Ojukwu. They were having strong times because Ojukwu felt he was going the wrong way. In fact, if the counter coup of July had not happened, perhaps Ironsi would have removed Ojukwu as the governor of the Eastern region. Remember, it was Ironsi that appointed Ojukwu as the governor of the Eastern region. So both men were already having serious quarrels. Ojukwu felt Ironsi was derailing. So he was taking him up seriously. They were already fighting. By the time I come to the story of Victor Banjo, I'll be bringing the daughter of Victor Banjo into the studio soon. And on Monday, I also explained the point that the moment, because some are already writing me, why is the program dominated by Yoruba voices? That where are the Igbo voices? The point is that this studio is in Ibadan, and I'm surrounded by mostly Yoruba scholars. I have spoken to many Igbo scholars. The problem is getting them into the studio. Most of them are in the East. Some are in Lagos though. But with time, we'll have to go and meet them. But that is, the cost of production will rise. Because I'll be now moving with a team of, say, 6 persons. Imagine what it means to fly from here to Owerri for an interview. So the cost of production will rise. But we are looking at it. We'll see what we will do. I want to interview Coups Ilegbunam, the author of the book Ironsi. We've been talking. In January, he told me he was in Lagos. That what do we do? And at that time, I was outside the country. But I hope to bring Coups Ilegbunam to the studio. It will be a happy moment for me. Because that book Ironsi is one of the best books you can read on Nigerian history. And he has a lot to explain. So soon you begin to also see some Igbo scholars. But at the moment, we are also having objective conversations. I also don't want to see my program as an Igbo Yoruba thing. Because I'm reading the comments on TikTok. I can see the dirty fight going on there. And sometimes I cringe. What's going on? What's wrong with Nigerians? The issue is not Igbo Yoruba. You are miscalculating. The basic issue is the political elite and the structural defects of the Nigerian state. Don't allow anybody to tell you it's Igbo Yoruba thing. Now, the Yoruba nation is such a civilized nation. The Igbo nation is such a civilized nation. So when I see some Igbo peasants and Yoruba peasants at the fringes throwing brick bats, taking on themselves, using dirty words, I say, man, they are lost. It is more than that. Don't join that kind of debate. Yes, sometimes it is tempting to join it. But solving the Nigerian question requires deeper introspection. And it cannot be done on the basis of brickbats. Talking about Ironsi, one of the biggest blunders that Ironsi made was to promulgate Unification Decree 34. By the time Ironsi took over, Nigeria was a federal system. You had the eastern region, the western region, the northern region, and the Midwest region. It was a federal system that was working. Ironsi came with Decree 34, a unitary system. He centralized the governance of Nigeria. And he did that to resolve the widening division in the country. But this caused more disaffection, having weakened the federating regions. It was one of the reasons Ojukwu fought him. Let's go back to 1966, when Ironsi was the head of state. He called a press conference.
In the regions, there will be military government under a military governor, assisted by an advisor who is the last person to hold the office of the regional governor. The normal function of government in each region will be carried on by the permanent secretaries in the region, and they will be directly responsible to the military government there. The regional military governments are directly responsible to the head of the federal military government and the supreme commander of the armed forces, Federal Republic of Niger. Public corporations and other statutory bodies, such as local governments, will continue to function under the appropriate ministries. All existing laws, regulations, orders,
and official instructions remain in force, wherever applicable, until either modified or abrogated by the federal military government.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
That was the head of state, General Aguiyi Ironsi, in a 1966 press conference. You know, when Ironsi took over, the Hausa Fulani group whose hold on power was upturned by the coup of January 1966 opposed Ironsi's Unification Decree 34, and it led to his assassination on the 29th of July 1966 in a counter coup championed by Hausa Fulani officers. General Theophilus Danjuma was one of the culprits. Some are saying he has a story to tell about how they killed Aguiyi Ironsi. But the main beneficiary of the counter coup of the 29th of July 1966 was Yakubu Gowon. He was not a Fulani, he was a Christian from the Middle Belt. So he became the head of state after the death of Aguiyi Ironsi. A fallout of the July coup was the killing of Igbo people living in northern Nigeria in continuation of the mission to avenge the death of northern leaders that were eliminated in the 15th January 1966 coup. So the killing of Igbo people in the north is what is today known as Pogrom. They were killed in their numbers. So Igbo people began to run away from the north. Corpses were moving to the north. You know, at that point, Igbo people began to call for war. According to some, at that point, they had no option but to defend themselves. It was a pogrom. Ojukwu kept seeing corpses of Igbo people being brought home to the eastern region. Perhaps he could take it no more. And it led to the Civil War. I'm laying a background to Aburi Accord. Are you in this class of history, politics, and power? Call your friends. Call your children, your brothers and sisters to join the class. Share the broadcast. Retweet. Leave your comment. I want to read from you. Do you have a question for me? You can also ask me some questions. If you are watching on YouTube, thank you for joining the broadcast. You're on X, I appreciate you for joining the class. Are you on Facebook? Yes, I can see you. Thank you for joining the broadcast. On YouTube, I can see Dikbo Adewumi saying, hello, Radio Man. Thank you for the continuation of the class. Thank you, Dikbo, for joining the class. Let me see if there are comments on Facebook. Let me read your comments. Okay. Yes, I'm on Facebook now. I can see Akonye Umoba. Akonye, thank you for always being there. Hamed Ulugbenga says Major Isaac Dakaboro, an environmental activist, the first man to champion the campaign for minority rights in Nigeria. Hamed Ulugbenga, thank you for being in class. Chukwubueze Onyeze says Aburi should have saved Nigeria, but it's late. But Nigeria is not dead. And Azodo Chijoke, good to have you in this class of politics and power. Remember, my phone line is open now. You can call in. I want to hear your voice. So you can call in. The lines are on the screen. And I think Ayo can also post the numbers by typing it. So, let me see. Abdullahi Abdul Jalil. Are we not transmitting on the app? Jalil said we are not transmitting on the app, State Affairs app. Okay. We are transmitting now. Sorry, Jalil. Okay, we are on the app now. So if you can listen on State Affairs app. Thank you for raising that. You can listen on State Affairs app. You can download the app on Google Play Store and Apple Store. Bamidele Jinodu, thank you for joining the class. Okoro Donchukwu Izundu, I'm happy you're here. Florence Shaw Abolade, thank you. Emmanuel Emenike says, I enjoy all your programs. Thank you, Emenike. Ayinde Olabisi, thank you for joining the class. Kondo Obieze says, well done, Radio Man. I think Nigeria has not yet healed from the wounds of the civil war. But the worst is that the very mistakes that led to the war are still being repeated in our very eyes. For Lawrence Shabolade said, what happened to your TikTok? How do you mean? My TikTok is on, just that we are not transmitting on TikTok. Yes, we are not live on TikTok. But if you go on TikTok, you have updates of most of our broadcasts. Soon we'll begin to do TikTok live. But at the moment we are transmitting, or we are streaming, let me not use transmitting, because we are not using transmitter. So at the moment we are streaming on Facebook, on X, on LinkedIn, and YouTube. And we are streaming on the app. So, let me see if there are comments on X. Okay. Okay, I can't see comments here yet. X. Okay, I can see calls are coming in. Just keep trying. You can call again. WhatsApp calls. Do WhatsApp calls. WhatsApp gives you the best audio quality. So call on WhatsApp. You can call on WhatsApp and I'll be ready to talk to you. Let's continue the discourse. Another question I want to answer here is, and remember to make your comment brief. Don't make it too long. I can see, yes, Izundu is calling. Hello, Chukwemeka Izundu Okoro.
No, Mr. Edmund.
Yes, I can hear you. So good afternoon from Nigeria. Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you're faint. We have to change this cable. Ewa, we have to change this cable. It's not tight. Okay. Ewa, you can turn it down. Okay. Now, another question. They did not plan to break away. We'll fix that. We'll fix it. They did not plan to break away from Nigeria. Let's look at it from this angle. Britain handed over the command of the Nigerian army to indigenous soldiers in 1965. The outgoing general officer commanding, Major General Welby Everard, had preferred Brigadier Babafemi Ogundigbe to succeed him, but his recommendation was rejected, leading to General Aguiyi Ironsi, the most senior officer taking charge of the army. When another opportunity came for Ogundigbe after the bloody July 1966 coup, he was overlooked again because it was felt he would not be able to control soldiers from the north who were not ready to take orders from a head of state of southern extraction. The executioners of the July coup, that is the counter coup, are Murtala Muhammad. Murtala Muhammad was the leader of that coup, not Goan. But some said Goan manipulated Murtala to be the arrowhead. That's a subject of argument. Theophilus Danjuma was among those who arrested Ironsi in Ibadan. There was Martin Adamu, Shitu Alao, Musa Usman, and Joe Garba and others. After a successful coup, these northern officers wanted the northern region to break away from Nigeria. At this time, they were tired of the problem of the Igbo man. They just wanted to go on their own. Let the Igbos go on their own and Yorubas go your way. Enough. That was the idea after the counter coup. If you've read Max Siollun's book entitled Oil, Politics and Violence, he said Brigadier Babafemi Ogundigbe, in a phone conversation, told Ojukwu that northern officers wanted to break away. The officers of the north, in a hurry to break away, hijacked a British VC-10 plane bound for London. They hijacked the plane and flew their families to Kanu from Lagos in preparation for the declaration of North's independence from Nigeria. The mutineers gave northerners in Lagos 40 hours to leave and return to the north in preparation for the declaration of a country of the north. How the table turned that the northern officers who wanted to break away became the same officers who fought Ojukwu tirelessly to keep Nigeria one. That is also the tragedy of history. Murtala, the leader of the hardliners, and his co-travelers were convinced not to break away from Nigeria as it would backfire for economic and military reasons. So northern officers later rallied round Goan to consolidate their leadership, having seen the need to remain in the entity called Nigeria. This was welcomed in the north as victory for the people. It was celebrated, leading to deadly attacks on southerners in northern Nigeria, mostly Igbo people. So I've just talked about the attempt by the North to break away. Now, let's go back a bit. Who made the first attempt, the first serious attempt to break away from Nigeria? And perhaps we will not cast our minds back to what is going on in the Niger Delta at the moment. Because you have a lot of militants with good guns in the Niger Delta. In the next 10 years, what do you think will come out from the Niger Delta if Nigeria is not restructured? Let's talk about one man. Isaac Adakaboro. Major Isaac Adakaboro was an Ijaw nationalist who died in the line of duty fighting for Nigeria against Biafra. In the early years of Nigeria's independence from Britain, he was in the forefront of the campaign for minority rights. He formed the armed militia, Niger Delta Volunteer Force, to demand for a larger share of proceeds of oil wealth for his people. You can see the agitation for resource control has been there. On the 23rd of February 1966, Isaac Adakaboro and his guys declared the Niger Delta Republic. After a 12-day war with the federal government of Nigeria, the militia was defeated and its members arrested for treason. You know, Ojukwu was among those who brought down Isaac Adakaboro's rebellion. Yes, he was among those who brought down that rebellion as a military officer. So at the outbreak of the Nigerian Civil War in May 1967, Isaac Adakaboro and his comrades, who were in prison at the time, were pardoned by the federal government and they were enlisted to fight the war on the Nigerian side. He was killed on the 9th of May 1968 near Okrika, Rivers State. Born on the 10th of September 1938 in Oloibiri, remember Oloibiri? The place where oil was first discovered in Nigeria. So that was where Isaac Adakaboro was born. Oloibiri, where oil was first discovered in Nigeria. So to carry out his campaign, Boro left University of Nigeria Nsukka, where he was the student union president, to pursue his 12-day revolution. His revolt was the first armed uprising against independent Nigeria. In this interview, Dr. Yemi Farumbi talks of the Adakaboro he met at the University of Nigeria Nsukka. Farumbi is Nigeria's former ambassador to the Philippines. He is a respected broadcaster. A country that don't learn from history will not understand why Isaac Adakaboro took up arms against the state. He died in 1968. Adakaboro was a man you saw in the University of Nigeria Nsukka.
Yes.
What did you see in him as a student union leader?
First and foremost, in those days, at the University of Nigeria, the man who easily could emerge as a president would be an Igbo man. But here was a Niger Delta person, whom we all unanimously elected, because he had revolutionary concepts about governance, even at student union level. He had revolutionary concepts about relationship between the university management and the student. If you remember then, as at that time, the University of Nigeria was being managed by Michigan State University. And it appeared that they just came and wanted to translate what they had in Michigan to University of Nigeria. And in many dialogue, he drew attention to this. You have to domesticate whatever you are bringing. You have to look at the reality of the Nigerian situation. I found him an eloquent speaker. I found him a very intelligent person. I found him a left-of-the-center politician who subscribed, as at that time, like many of us, to the Marxist doctrine. But at the same time, he felt bad about his people because he left the university. He didn't finish. He left the university because he couldn't stand the fact that there was oil spillage in his area.
And he came from the community, Oloibiri, where oil was discovered.
Oil was first discovered in 1958.
So when he formed the Ijaw Volunteer Force, Was it clear at the time that a time bomb had exploded in the Niger Delta?
You see, it had, but we didn't see it because we refused to see it. And because at that time, oil was not too significant in our revenue calculation. It became significant at about 1970, 71, and so on. When oil came in 1958, it was not important. In fact, if it was important, I'm sure the British wouldn't have left. They would still be here. They would have shown better interest in staying longer, But we didn't listen to what he was saying. We didn't even understand what he was saying. Somebody ought to have asked, why will a university student abandon his education to go and fight when he was in train?
And in February 1966, he declared the Niger Delta Republic.
That was the time to have started an exercise that would probably have resolved this matter. We would have found out what really is the issue. Like I said earlier, Nigeria is not the only country producing crude oil from Delta. But Nigeria is the only country producing crude oil from an area and abandoning that area. How does a hen lay eggs for you and you refuse to give it maize?
On a good day, should we have studied the Adakaburu instinct at the time?
I believe so.
He wrote a book, The 12-Day Revolution.
Yes. I believe, in fact, when he opted to support Nigeria against the Biafran there, we ought to have had a debriefing session with him. What motivated you? Because historically, he's the first person to have attempted secession in Nigeria. We ought to have found out from him, what was your motivation? Why did you do this? How do you think that these problems can be solved? And we will have taken off from there. We've had too many lost opportunities in this country. I mean, when I think I feel like crying. I mean, after the Civil War, we lost also an opportunity. There was an IMT in Enugu that was producing bombs, that was doing Ogunike and things like that. What did you do with it?
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Yes, Yemi Farum be telling us about Isaac Adakaburu. You can see the issues that made Nigeria dysfunctional, leading to Aburi Accord. Let's look at another point. Then we'll now go into the details of the agreement. The Western Region election crisis of 1965 was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Politicians in the two blocs in the Western region employed different tactics to outdo themselves, resulting in killings and destructions of properties. The action group felt at the time that Akintola in connivance with the federal government rigged the 1965 election. So action group supporters took to the street, leading to clashes that cost lives. That event is popularly known as Operation Wetier. When action group members attacked supporters of Akintola, thousands were killed in Yoruba land. That was in 1965. That Operation Wetier crisis raged till the 15th of January 1966, when the military struck in a bloody coup. The young officers made their intentions known in the speech that Nzogu read to the nation. Let's look at what Nzogu said. Our enemies are the political profiteers, the swindlers, the men in high and low places that seek bribes and demand 10%, those that seek to keep the country divided permanently so that they can remain in office as ministers or VIPs, the tribalists, nepotists, those that make the country look big for nothing before the international circles, those that have corrupted our society by their words and deeds. That was in Zogu's Coup broadcast of 1966. The coup took the lives of the premier of the northern region, Ahmadu Bello, took the life of the premier of the western region, Ladoke Akintola. The coupists eliminated the prime minister and head of government, Tafawa Balewa, his minister of finance, Okotiebo, and sub-top military officers from the north and Yoruba lands were taken out. At this point, Nigeria was on the path of self-destruction. Major General Aguiyi Ironsi, the most senior army officer at the time, stepped in to rescue the situation. And that marked the beginning of the long road to military governance in Nigeria. It is of note to state here that Nigeria did not pioneer military governance in Africa. As at 1952, Colonel Gamal Abdel Nasser overthrew the monarchy of Egypt led by King Farouk. On January 13, 1963, former president of Togo, Sylvanus Olympio, was assassinated, and the Nasigbe Yadima assumed the reign of power. Benin Republic tasted its first coup in 1965, while the Central African Republic and Burkina Faso all had their military coups. And those coups came before 1966. The Pan-Africanist, the charismatic and powerful Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, learnt a bitter lesson from the plotters that ousted his government in 1966 in Ghana. Though Nkrumah was not killed, he was forced out of the country. That military leader that removed Nkrumah as the president of Ghana, Joseph Ankara, was the same man who brokered peace between Gowon and Ojukwu in Aburi. The mayhem in northern Nigeria after the January coup was pursued with unseasoned brutality, leading to the death of Igbo sons and daughters. The killings continued after the counter-coup of the same year, led by some northern officers. What has Yakubu Gowon got to say about the coup? Here he explains the coup, or the coups, of 1966. The program is State Affairs.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
The coup was in two places, one in Lagos, then another one in Kaduna. I was very busy with the security activity. The political side of it was being taken by the General Officer Commanding, General Ironsi, and some other senior officers. And when they came back, I remembered they told me that the acting president had, and the rank of parliament had told the general officer commanding to take charge until he can restore discipline and loyalty in the Nigerian armed forces. And so I asked the officers that were with him, I said, is that so? I asked 3 times. And they said, yes, that is what it is. So at that stage, I said to the general, you have my double loyalty. My thought of saying to return the status quo now would not apply, because my senior GOC and now my new head of state had been given that authority to become the new head of state and commander-in-chief. So he is now my commander-in-chief, head of state and commander-in-chief. And so that was how the military came to take over the first military regime that we had. The next 6 months was a very difficult period. It was a period of anxiety because of what had happened, the coup that took place in Lagos and in Kaduna. And we did everything in order to hold back any reaction. But unfortunately, that reaction could not be stopped any further. And at the end of July, we had another crisis which cost the life of the general officer commanding, because of the so much mistrust among the cross-section of the army officers, especially on regional basis, the north and the south. The question of trust, because of the loss of many officers that were so dear to the men and women in the armed forces. These young officers decided, we do not want anyone to give us leadership but me.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Yes, Yakubu Gowon there. I hope you are enjoying the class. Let me get your feedback. Look at this work. You see this work? The Nigerian Century. You see this work? It's a big book, The Nigerian Century. I recommend this book to you, The Nigerian Century. It will prepare you for the future. It will give you values and orientations of the future. The Nigerian Century captures the essence of Nigeria, her people, her power, and the creative energy that engineers her colorful and sometimes turbulent history. From the era of Lord Lugard, through the oftentimes bloody anti-colonial struggle to the heady days of the immediate post-independence era and the uncertain dark days of the Civil War, this is a book that delineates Nigeria's history and captures the pulsating essence and immediacy of past events. Get your copy on udarabooks.com. And you can also get this book through the WhatsApp numbers pinned to this broadcast. Those same numbers you can call. They are Udara Books numbers. So you can get this book and expand your history and political horizon and get inspired by the mistakes of the past and the successes of the past. Yes, there were successes of the past and there were mistakes of the past. So I recommend this book to you. It's a big book. Another book that falls into the same category as this one is this book, Nigeria, the Birth of Africa's Greatest Country. You see it? Nigeria, the Birth of Africa's Greatest Country. You know, here you will read about some of the articles written by Obafemi Awolowo. You see, there's one article here, Nnamdi Azikiwe faces inquiry. The big race for self-government. You know what books like this do to you? They take you very close to the past and then project you into the future. You now become a solution finder. This is one of the best publications that studies post and pre-independence. It chronicles the socio-political events of colonial and immediate post-colonial Nigeria as recorded by the most popular magazine then, the Drum magazine. It talks about the diverse and turbulent events and the numerous complex characters who occupied the center stage in the epic drama that was the evolution of the Nigerian state. So this work parade an array of political stars. Adegoke Adelabu, have you heard of that man? Festus Okotiebo, he was killed in the January 1966 coup. Are you a lover of communication? Have you read any of the works of Mbonu Ojike? Akintola is studied in this work. Michael Okpara, Tafawa Balewa, you want to read about him? You'll find it here. Anthony Nahuru, and the larger-than-life trio of Obafemi Awolowo, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and Amadu Bello. The beauty of this work is that you have Volume 1 and Volume 2. You can see them here. Volume 1 and 2 together. Big book of history, politics, and power. You see them? Get your own copy on udarabooks.com. Reading opens the mind. Read and continue to read. Nigeria, the birth of Africa's greatest country. You'll find it on udarabooks.com. So get your copies there. You can call me now on 080 Call that number only. 999 18449. So call me on that number 080 999 18449. Let me hear from you. I want to hear a voice, at least a voice, before I conclude the story. So we are going into the details of Aburi now. So you can call 080 999 18449. And you can visit udarabooks.com. We have more than 400 titles on politics and power. Our focus is politics. So if you go on the store, check books. And we are ready to send the books to you anywhere in Nigeria. And they will get to you. Let's now look at the details. The details of Aburi Accord. Chief Lekon Alabi and Professor Ayuade will lay a foundation for us as we go into the details. Godfrey Abeze says the killing of Igbos in the north didn't start in 1966 after the so-called Igbo Coup. In the 50s, Igbos were murdered in Kanu and Jos. Professor Ayuade, it seems history repeats itself constantly in Nigeria. From this comment, what do you have to say?
Well, there has always been ethnic conflicts all over the place. But what was peculiar about the murder of Igbos in 1966 was that they were specifically targeted, and their properties were burnt out or either taken over and so on. It was a different kind of thing. What prompted the 1966 one was political. For some of the earlier ones, it was either economic or something, competition in the marketplace and so on. So it was a different kind of conflict. And it resulted in what could be called pogrom, because it was a merciless, blind kind of attack on anybody. If you were Igbo, then they went for him.
You see,
it wasn't a question of whether they offended or they did not offend.
It was even that bad that the 5th Battalion in Kanu took part in the pogrom. Ojukwu explained it. On May 29th, while Ironsi was there, that was the beginning of the pogrom. May 29 led to July 29th. July 29th led to the murder of the pogrom, September 29th. You know, I keep asking, what is special about 29th? May 29th, July 29th, September 29th. And later, Obasanjo came with May 29th as Independence Day. How do you break that down, Chief Leko Alabi?
Thank you very much. We have described May 29 as bloody in the history of Nigeria. So, and I'm talking of the MKO Abiola Dynamic Group, of which I was the General Secretary. And so, since the annulment in 1993, every year we hold the annual June 12 lecture and luncheon, telling Nigeria that the appropriate democracy day in Nigeria should be June 12 or October 1 or January 15, 1970, when the war ended, not May 29. May 29, for those who know, is dead. Anyway, it's no more our democracy day. It's June 12 now. May 29 has always been bloody because that was the date in 1804 when Uthman Danfodio started the so-called jihad. So go back to history. Nigeria, federal government of this country, we always implement certain policies that will have the gap of May 29 or May, ordinary. So thank God, May 29 is out of our national calendar. It is now June 12 that is Democracy Day. May 29, you have started with the call-off you are recalling now. Why must everything bloody in this country be started or done on May 29 or May? The May 29 pogrom in the north was spurred on by the decree which Major General JTU Aguiyi-Ironsi chopped out, turning Nigeria from federal to unitary system of government, and the northerners felt, where is the capacity to match the south? So each time anything is done in this country, they always look at the south as wishing to take advantage through the back door.
Is that not how the south is suspect in the north today?
I thank
everything wrong with Nigeria is the Fulani.
I thank you that you started and you have christened this program today as Aburi 2021. This is another opportunity for Nigeria to sit down and look at past mistakes. We could have avoided all these wastages of lives and property if we just sit down. Original Aburi report, which we are discussing on today, 1967, why did federal government make a, what do they call it now, face turn on the advice of a secretary of a cabinet? Why didn't you recall the other parties or send messages to Enugu that when we got home, we have held another meeting and we think we should review?
Okay, I want you to hear what Goan said. Let's look at some.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Yes, that was a 2021 discourse with Professor Ayuade and Chief Leko Alabi. Meanwhile, Aguiyi-Ironsi had set in motion the ad hoc constitutional conference to look at new political ideas for the survival of Nigeria. The killings of Igbos would lead to the suspension of the conference. When the Goan government found its footing and was ready to continue the conference, the Eastern Region delegation refused to return to the conference, fearing for their safety in Lagos. By this time, the Igbo nation was preparing for war. At the same time, Ojukwu refused to attend meetings of the Supreme Military Council, stating that he would not appear anywhere in Nigeria having the presence of northern soldiers. I quote him, "I, as the military governor of the East, cannot meet anywhere in Nigeria where there are northern troops." Because at this point, people were calling for negotiation. Ojukwu, meet with Goan. Let's talk. Ojukwu said, "No way. I am not going to Lagos to meet Goan. I'm not going anywhere in Nigeria after seeing what they have done to my people in the north." Ojukwu also turned down the ideas of a meeting in a British naval ship or in Benin. Going outside the country for a meeting became an acceptable option by both sides. Aburi in Ghana would do, and General Joseph Ankara dispatched a Ghanaian Air Force plane to fly the Eastern Region delegation from Enugu to Ghana. In Ghana, the discussion started. But before then, before going to Ghana, when Ojukwu saw that his suggestions on how to attain a peaceful resolution of the fallout of the bloody coups of January and July 1966 were not accommodated by the Goan-led federal government, the meeting in Aburi in Ghana became to him the last chance for peace. Ojukwu said that the decisions agreed on could have saved the situation, but again, Goan was badly advised. It was the meeting of the members of the Supreme Military Council of Nigeria held in Aburi, Ghana, on the 4th and 5th of January 1967. It was the first time all members of the Supreme Military Council were meeting in 6 months. The chairman of the Ghana National Liberation Council, Lieutenant General Joseph Ankara, declared the Aburi meeting opened. He welcomed the visitors to Ghana and called for the amicable resolution of the issues bedeviling Nigeria. After his address, he vacated the conference room, leaving the Nigerian military officers to resolve their quarrel. Who were the military officers in that meeting? Ojukwu, as the governor of the Eastern Region, was there. Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, the head of state, was there. Commander Joseph Akinwale, commander of the Navy, was in that meeting. Colonel Robert Adeyinka Adebayo, the governor of the Western Region, was in Aburi. Lieutenant Colonel Usman Hassan Katsina, the governor of the Northern Region, was in Aburi. Also in Aburi was the governor of the Midwest Region, Lieutenant Colonel David Ejo. Major Mobolaji Johnson, governor of Lagos, was in the Aburi meeting. The Inspector General of Police of Nigeria, Alhaji Kam Saleh, was part of the Aburi discourse. Also part of the discourse was the Deputy Inspector General of Police, Timothy Omobare. There were other civilians from both sides in the meeting. It was a rich discourse. At the meeting, Ojukwu condemned arms build-up by Nigeria in preparation for war. He accused the federal military government of paying $1 million for some arms bought from Italy and stored in Kaduna. Ojukwu called for the renunciation of the use of force in the settlement of the dispute. Ojukwu and the Eastern region were also alleged by the federal military government of stockpiling arms. Goan and company suspected that the plane carrying arms that crashed on the Cameroon's border was destined for Enugu. But Ojukwu denied the allegation. Having set the right tone for the debate, the combatants reaffirmed their faith in discussions and negotiation as the only peaceful way of resolving the Nigerian crisis. And they agreed on the following points. 1. They agreed that a military committee comprising representatives of the regions should meet to take statistics of arms and ammunition in the country. They agreed that these arms, unallocated, should be held and shared equitably between the various commands in the Federation. So you know what this means? Ojukwu was able to convince the Nigerian delegation that the army, that means the East, should have its own army. The North should have its own army. The Midwest should have its own army, and the Western region should have its own army. You know, when you have your own army like that, what remains? That means the country is gone. Goan agreed. Did Ojukwu sweet talk them? Number 2, they agreed that the army should be reorganized in order to restore discipline and confidence, specifically. So under this number 2, the army should be governed by the Supreme Military Council, which would be chaired by a commander-in-chief of the armed forces and the head of the federal military government. So subsection 2, they agreed that area commands under area commanders and corresponding to existing regions should be created. That means each region should have a command of the army. In subsection C of 2, they agreed that during the period of the military government, military governors should have control over area commands for internal security. You know, Ojukwu came prepared. So he bamboozled Goan and his team. They didn't know when they were agreeing to all his terms. Under subsection 2, they agreed in Aburi that a military headquarters comprising equal representation from the regions and headed by a chief of staff should be established. They also agreed that a Lagos garrison, including Ikeja barracks, should be created. Aburi. Now, you remember Dr. Obadiah Melafia? May his soul rest in peace. Obadiah Milafia, that scholar from the Middle Belt. He was like a thorn in the flesh of the Buhari government. He's no more. You know, I had a 3-hour discussion of Aburi on radio, and he was one of my guests. He was speaking from Abuja. So let's go back to 2021. Here is a discourse between Milafia and Professor John Ayuade.
None of them truly believed in Aburi. Even Ojukwu, for him, Aburi was a stepping stone to his own ambition to be a big fish in a small pond called Biafra. Number one, Aburi was not a mediation meeting. It was not an arbitral settlement. It was not a treaty agreement. So nobody can hold a head of state on the basis of that kind of agreement, which was a gentleman's agreement. Even if it were a treaty, under the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, whatever agreement you make outside your country, you must come back home and domesticate it through a process of accession and through a process of ratification. For whatever reason, Aburi, in the end, if it had been implemented, in fact, set conditions that were unfulfillable. And if you cannot implement a treaty, honestly speaking, it is null and void and of no effect whatsoever.
What did Aburi mean to you? The first 3 agreements about regional commands, did that mean that Goan was losing his authority?
That was a failure because there is no military in the whole world of military history that has regional armies with separate commands. Doesn't exist anywhere. So they were making something that they know will not work. That's number one. It was, in effect, even though Chukwu said Confederation was never mentioned, but in fact, it was, what they had agreed was a de facto Confederation. And it would not have worked because there is no Confederation anywhere in the world. Even Swiss that started as a confederation, they are not a federation. So there's no confederation anywhere in the world. Confederation is like NATO. It's neither here nor there. So when who was at that time Siollun, when he saw it, as permanent secretary in the cabinet, he had a duty to draw, and he was doing his job as a civil servant. As a civil servant in those days, until they became what they are now, I don't know what they are. In those days, they were very serious people. And Akinzwa too was a prince. If there is a prince in Nigeria, he was a prince of the princes. He went to Cambridge. He read law and public administration. He knew his onions. He told Goan, this thing is not going to work. Because if it's to be implemented, the country will disintegrate. And then thirdly, they created an agreement whereby the governors had veto powers on what the commander-in-chief would do. Certain agreements must be sent to them. They must give their approval. They must give power, my brother. Power is never shared anywhere.
All right.
With anybody.
Dr. Milafia, let's come to Professor Ayuade. Was Aburi a confederation?
The arrangement was just to cool off. Now, in a dispute, you must get back to a situation where people can still talk together. And what Aburi tried to do was to evolve a kind of devolution of powers, which does not mean autonomy. It only meant that you be responsible for certain things, and that those things would then be discussed at a higher level if there is need to do so. So it was a devolutionary arrangement. It wasn't really confederation. Although they misunderstood it and they talked about confederation.
Was it workable from what Milafia has explained? Different commands of the military.
You see, they were governing Nigeria. They were not governing the military. The point is that when they were talking about the military, actually they were using the military as a euphemism for the people. It couldn't have been military. The military wasn't, that was not the problem. The problem was the governance of the country.
Remember, clause 2 subsection D states, a military headquarters comprising equal representation from the regions and headed by a chief of staff should be established. A Lagos garrison, including Ikeja barracks, should be established. But look at this. It said during the period of the military government, military governors should have control over area commands for internal security.
Yeah.
That was taking power from the center.
It did not take power from the center. You see, even now under this constitution, I don't know what to call it, whether federal or unitary.
What do you call it?
I think it's a bastardized federal system. We don't have a federal system now. But the governor is still the person in charge of security. But it has been messed up in the sense that the policeman, the police commissioner under him, is responsible to somebody outside. So really it creates a problem. And that's the kind of rough edges that we need to clean up. You are either in charge or you are not in charge. There are occasions when it becomes impossible for a governor to give instruction to a police commissioner. He would take his instruction from the IG, not from the governor. And at the same time, the police commissioner is a member of the security committee in the state. So I think that these are areas that need to be cleaned up. And under the Aburi thing, the governor is either in charge of his state in terms of internal security. Somebody in Abuja cannot be taking care of the security of people in Elebu, in Ibadan. It has to be domiciled in the place. That's what Aburi was talking about.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Yes, that debate between Dr. Obadiah Milafia of blessed memory and Professor John Ayoade, Emeritus Professor of Political Science, different views. On YouTube, I can see Madu Abuchi saying this program will educate some young Nigerians. I can see Olugbenga Ayomide saying, hello, Edmund. Thank you for this rich enlightenment. I'm in class today. Thank you, Olugbenga, for being part of the class. Adesina Bolaji is saying, thank you, Radio Man. Your program is just right and timed when Nigeria is highly polarized along tribal lines. Nigeria has always been polarized along tribal lines. I can see Eniola Koka saying, going back to the old days. Thank you. Tough Black Seed says, hello, Edmund. Thanks for the clarity you bring to the otherwise complicated history of the Civil War. I am watching from Rome, Italy. Adidayo Adeleke says, hello, Edmund, thank you. And keep up the good work. You are the only radio personality keeping history alive. Are you sure? Okay, thank you. I hope the government can take steps to restore the teaching of history. Yes, that has been done. History is back in our schools, okay? Yeah, Jonathan initiated it. Did he finish? But I know Buhari signed it. So history is back in our schools. You know, we need to study history. That is why this is a class of history, politics, and power. We need to study history. We need to read history. Let's read from a book. Aburi, how did Ojukwu do it? I have a book here entitled You Must Set Forth at Dawn. Memoirs, powerful and arresting, should be required reading everywhere. You Must Set Forth at Dawn is Wole Soyinka's autobiography. You see it? But this is the old edition. I think I bought this about, when did I buy this book? Before we established Udara Books, should be about 12 years ago, I remember. That's when I bought this book. But this is now what the book looks like. This is what you'll find on udarabooks.com. This is what you will find on udarabooks.com. Okay? I'll come back to this. So because this is the one I've been reading, so I like reading it. I don't read the new one. You know, though the pages might be different, there were some adjustment. So I want to read from page 125. Soyinka said here, there was a marked difference of approach for the Aburi encounter, one that already signaled the certain repudiation of whatever agreements were made. Soyinka continued. The federal side, led by Yakubu Gowon, attended the meeting with an open book, a laissez-faire state of mind. By contrast, Odumegwu Ojukwu, still governor of the eastern region and de facto leader of the Igbo, had arrived meticulously prepared. Not surprisingly, he largely had his way. The protocols and agreements were signed to fanfare and popped champagnes, and they all returned home with the map of the nation superficially intact but visibly shredded. That is Wole Soyinka's description. And this is one book I think you should have. You Must Set Forth at Dawn. You know, someday I'm going to discuss Wole Soyinka's role in the war. You know, Soyinka appointed himself as a diplomat, trying to bring peace between both sides. You know, he was traveling to Eastern region, meeting Ojukwu and others, trying to negotiate peace. So when he came back to Nigeria at some point, Goan arrested him and jailed him. He was in prison throughout the war. And when he wrote, and the man died in prison. Oh, I didn't come with that book. And the man died. If you read those books, You Must Set Forth at Dawn and the Man Died, you have another perspective of the Civil War. I see some persons who don't want to read certain persons. Oh, because I don't like him, I won't read him. No. I read everybody. I want to understand their perspectives. I read Obasanjo's perspective of the war. I like Soyinka's perspective of the war. So if you get this book, you will see Soyinka's perspective. So this is what you will find on udarabooks.com. You Must Set Forth at Dawn. Soyinka's autobiography. Well written. Lovely. Get your copy on udarabooks.com. Or you can contact us through the WhatsApp numbers. Our WhatsApp numbers. And you can get your copy. You Must Set Forth at Dawn. Memoirs. If the spirit of African democracy has a voice and a face, they belong to Wole Soyinka. You Must Set Forth at Dawn. Lovely book. I will read it again, and again. In this book, look at this one. Yes, by Mark Siollun. Oil, Politics and Violence. Sadly, we don't have this book. We don't have it anymore. But it's a classic. Oil, Politics and Violence. Nigeria's Military Coup Culture. We don't have it again on Udara Books. Wow. Nigeria's Military Coup Culture 1966 to 1976. Then he did a follow-up. Soldiers of Fortune. You'll find that on udarabooks.com. Now, in this book, here is what Siollun said. He said, why the federal delegation behaved as if the Aburi conference was a social gathering to reunite former friends who had fallen out in a social tiff. Ojukwu saw the conference for what it really was, a historic constitutional debate that would determine Nigeria's future social and political structure. That is how Siollun explained Aburi. Now let's go back to Yakubu Gowon, what they said after the conference. Let's listen.
The purpose of this press conference is to enlighten the public on the last Accra meeting of military leaders and to tell the nation where we go from here. Our main concern at the Aburi meeting was how to keep the country together and restore normal conditions. We reviewed the situation in the Nigerian army, and we all agreed that there should be one Nigerian army under a unified command as at present. We recognize that in the context of the events of 1966, the most practical way of achieving this aim is to organize the army into area commands. We did not go to Aburi to write a new constitution for Nigeria. The constitution of Nigeria will be written in Nigeria by Nigerians on the authority of the people of Nigeria. We, however, agreed to return to the status quo ante January 17, 1966. And this is in keeping with my earlier public pronouncements that decrees or part of decrees which tended towards over-centralization should be repealed. We will continue to operate the existing federal constitution and the federal system of government until a new constitution is drawn up. In Aburi, we made an excellent start in the bid for permanent peace, but let us not deceive ourselves that it was possible to solve all Nigeria's problems in the two-day meeting of minds of Nigeria's military leaders. I did say immediately after that conference that Nigeria will definitely remain united. I would never have said so if we went there to fall apart. Nigeria will remain one indivisible country by the will of the people of this country.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
At Aburi, yes, we agreed on area commands for the armed forces. At Aburi, we agreed that the police force will be decentralized. We agreed on those. Yes. We agreed even to show that we didn't separate. At Aburi, we also agreed on a certain revenue formula. That's what happened at Aburi. Aburi again, because I always end up, it sounds odd today, but I always end up by saying I must have been naive, because I believed actually that would be the end. I'll confess to you, when I got back to Enugu, oh yes, I had a party, believing that probably the danger was over. That's what we thought. Until they then began to deny everything. It was the denial of Nigeria that made me publish the tapes of Aburi, because we had insisted that each one should have a set of tapes. Everybody talks about Confederation. Go and look at the transcript. There is no time that the word Confederation came from my lips.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
When we came back, and Ojukwu did not go to make the statement he made first, virtually giving the impression that we've agreed for a confederation to move apart, etc., which was really not in exactly that. If I had the opportunity to make my broadcast first, because that was the agreement, not for him to make the broadcast first. Then, if I had committed myself to what he said, then there wouldn't have been any problem. But he went and said certain things that certainly looked wrong, and therefore we saw in practically everything he did, I think it was for to play up to the gallery, not being sincere.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
The tapes are available. The records are there. In fact, only about 2 weeks ago, I saw a set of the records again. The transcripts are available. But we talked about the Nigerian situation. And certainly, at the end, everybody says, oh, you told them this, you did that. The fact was that our case was so clear that I actually believed at the end of Aburi that the problem was not Goan, but probably some ambassadors in Lagos who were pressing for something else. Because we understood each other. We agreed on every single point. The drafting was, in fact, my chief secretary with 2 other chief secretaries from the other side. They said, no. And drafted and agreed. We looked at it, we agreed. General Ankara read over the whole report again to us at the end. Asked us if we wanted to amend anything. No. At the end of all that, the position was so good that actually Ankara drove Jack, Goan, and myself to the airport. Jack was sitting on his left, I was sitting on his right. He was in the middle. And in the course of that journey, at a point, General Ankara shook his head and said, oh, thank you. Thank you. If only we can go on like this, everything would be all right. I believe I was the one. As I do now from time to time, I go for the dramatic. Suddenly I picked up Goan's hand, put it on Ankara's lap, brought my other hand, placed it on it, and I said, General, sir, hold us together, I want to say something. So General Ankara put his hand on top of the 2 hands, and I said, General, I want to assure you that I am totally satisfied with everything we said. I will even go further and say to you something I did not say at the conference, and that is that once we have implemented everything we have said, I would ask you for one favor and one favor only. And that would be to be the one to propose Jack Goan as a head of state of Nigeria.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Yes, you heard Yakubu Gowon, you heard Ojukwu, both men giving their sides of the story. We'll be ending the program at 4 p.m. West African time, so we'll have about 9 minutes to round off. Don't forget to also join me again on Friday, 2 p.m. West African time. I come on live on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 2 p.m. West African time. It is history, it is politics, it is power. Then on Saturdays, 8 to 11 a.m., I come on live, but on Splash FM Ibadan. So I come on live 4 times a week. On Mondays, 2 to 4, Wednesdays, 2 to 4 p.m., Fridays, 2 to 4 p.m. And when I'm not able to come on, I will inform you. There are times I will not be in town. I will be on the road on research. At those times, I won't be able to come on live, but you will be informed. Now, let's look at some points before we round off. Some of the agreements. Agreement number 3. In accordance with the decision of August 9, 1966, the officers agreed that army personnel of northern Nigeria origin should return to the north from the west. In order to meet the security needs of the west, a crash program of recruitment and training is necessary, but the details should be examined after the military committee has finished their work. You see, the East had top military officers like Madiebo in the army. The North had most of the infantry troops. But Yoruba nation had the fewest persons in the military. You know, when some people accuse Awolowo of not supporting Ojukwu, you know, when Awolowo came out from prison, he did an analysis and discovered that Yorubas had few persons in the army. There was no way they could fight. You know, Yorubas were not interested in the army. They were more of intellectuals, lawyer, doctor. They were not interested. So before the war emerged, Awolowo discovered that Yorubas didn't have armies. In fact, Fulanis were occupying Yoruba land. At some point, Awolowo had to demand from Goan to withdraw the Fulani, Hausa, and northern officers from Yoruba land. Because Yorubas became afraid. How come? So in Aburi, they agreed that northern officers should leave Yoruba land. Then a form of recruitment should be made so that we will have Yoruba army officers. Remember when Agui Ironsi was killed, the next senior military officer was a Yoruba man, Babafemi Ogundikbe, not Goan. He was supposed to have taken over, but the northern officer said, "You, who you be? No way." Because he had no infantry like Yoruba young officers to really back him. There were few. People like Major Alabi Sama, who later became a general. There were few of them. You know, Akinri Ade. Unlike the North, that had mostly the infantry officers. If you even looked at the war, the core North that really fought that war was the Middle Belt. You know, where you had the Langtang generals. You know, the Middle Belt was like the core of the army, not really the Fulani. Where your Yakubu Gowon came from. Yes, you had some Fulani officers like Buhari, Murtala Muhammad. Babangida was not a Fulani man. So another agreement that was reached in Aburi is that the Supreme Military Council should deal with all matters of policy, including promotion, to top executive posts in the armed forces and the police. The legislative and executive authority of the federal military government should be referred for determination, provided that where a meeting was not possible, such a matter must be referred to the military governors for their comments and concurrence. That was the point Obadiah Milafia raised in that 2021 interview. They agreed that appointments to the diplomatic and consular post, as well as to super-scale post in the federal public service and equivalent post in the federal corporations must be approved by the Supreme Military Council, and the governors of the regions are members of that council, so they can hold the council to ransom if they want to. Let me jump to some other points. You see, if you go online, you will find the details of Aburi Accord. You can download it online. Read it. They also agreed that the ad hoc constitutional committee should resume sitting as soon as practicable, and the question of accepting the unanimous recommendations of September 1966 should be considered at a later meeting of the Supreme Military Council. They agreed that Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu should keep his order that non-Easterners should leave the Eastern region under constant review with a view to its being lifted as soon as practicable. And he agreed that the next meeting of the Supreme Military Council should be within Nigeria at a venue to be mutually agreed. When Goan reneged on the agreement, Ojukwu insisted. He said, on Aburi we stand. I don't know what to call this book, but I think this is one of the best work on the Biafran War, because it is not one person telling his or her own story or embellishing the story. What the author of this book did, Dr. Luke Nnaemeka Aneke, did was to sit down and research on the work of journalists, researchers during the war. So he compiled like daily story of what happened till the end of the war. This book is a must-have for any student of history. You know, chapter 1 is the federal elections. On Thursday, December 31st, 1964, what happened? Election crisis widened. You see, he gives a note of what happened that day. On December 31st, 1964, 3 Federal Electoral Commission members resigned. You know, he gives you that analysis. It's like a diary, a writer keeping a diary of events leading to the war and events during the war and events after the war. I don't know. I think for me, it is my best work on Biafra. We just got about 100 copies. The book is scarce, but luckily, we got about 100 copies recently. It's the old publication. I think the author just kept it for himself, but just decided to release it to us. So you can get this work on udarabooks.com. Get it. I insist, get it. Try and afford it. It's a good book, and it's a big book. How many pages? 770-something pages. Yes. I think 777. Okay, 71 pages. 771 pages. I recommend this book to you. This is the book of the week. The Untold Story of the Nigerian Biafran War. Get your copy on udarabooks.com or through our WhatsApp numbers. Thank you for being there. And thank you for always joining the broadcast. We appreciate you. Are you on YouTube, on Facebook? Thank you for being part of the class. Don't forget to join us on Friday at 2 p.m. West African time for another broadcast. At 2 p.m. All right. I must thank Dominic Kadawa. Thank you for joining the class. He says, I'm in class with you, Edmond. Thank you for educating me on history. Olayemi Olamide Israel. Thank you. Thank you for the compliment. Ben Chidi. Thank you. Ahmed Olugbenga Bejide Lagilu Ojo. Thank you for joining the broadcast. Akali Bello. Thank you. Okoro Donchuk Sizundu, sorry you could not connect. Dominic, okay. Foloronsho Bolade. Thank you. You said in your own opinion, Nigeria needs to revert back to regional autonomy. Yes, a lot of persons are calling for that we must go back to the regions. I am Edmondo Bilo. I have my team here. Tosin Ayeni Oladile, he's a documentary photographer. So when you see my pictures, those beautiful pictures, it is Tosin. I have Ayo Ashimolowo. Ayo mostly handles the system. He streams. He does the video mixing. He has about 2 laptops in front of him. He controls the keyboard and he's assisted by Samuel Kalu. They work on the cameras too. And we have Miriam Giwa too. Together, we brought you this broadcast. Join us on Friday, 2 p.m. West African time. I am Edmund Obilo.
State Affairs with Edmond Obilo is live